Welcome to another Heliophile Gear Lab, a series of video tutorials aimed at my fellow music producers in which I can get really geeky and technical. This is the Nord Drum 2. However, you're not hearing the Nord Drum 2. I'm using it only as a MIDI controller. The sounds you're actually hearing are coming from the noise engineering Basimilus Iteritas Alter eurorack module. It's being modulated by parameters related to my MIDI performance, and at the end of the signal chain you're hearing a tiny bit of reverb just for realism. In this video I will explain how I made this patch and how you can use your MIDI controllers to play this wonderful module in a very musical and expressive way. So I'm not going to be playing the drums throughout this whole video. So I made a MIDI loop in my DAW. You can see some triggers and two different pitches, the highest one for snare drum, the bottom one for the tom, and some radically different velocities. Those parameters are coming into my modular through my MIDI to CV interface, yarns, and over here I'm outputting pitch, trigger and velocity from yarns to various destinations to in the end modulate BIA. Let's start with the velocity CV. It's being multed out to two different destinations. One of them is this VCA here at the top. It's the most obvious one. The velocity is modulating the output level or the volume of BIA before it goes into the reverb. So the harder I hit the note, the louder BIA signal will come through. The second destination for the velocity CV is to this VCA down here, and it's basically scaling the amount of control voltage that goes into the decay CV input on the BIA. Currently the knob of the decay is set to the minimum level of decay I want for my softest notes, and the amount of additional decay is relative to the amount of velocity, if you can follow me. I found that an exponential curve for this VCA works best to achieve the desired behavior. So what I'm doing with the pitch CV from my MIDI module is a little bit more complicated, but I'll try to explain. First, it goes into a precision adder, but it's only being used as a multiple to generate one positive copy and one negative copy. And I'll go into the negative one later. The positive copy of the pitch CV is going into a mixer, and the output of that mixer is going into the pitch CV input of BIA. Now what about the other inputs of the mixer? One of them is a mod envelope that I'm using on the pitch of every note. I'll explain the reason for this later. And the other one is a constant voltage that I can use to fine-tune the pitch of my overall drum. But basically right now what we need to know is that how the pitch relationship works. So the higher my MIDI note, the higher the pitch of my note in BIA. Now what about the negative copy of the pitch CV? This is being attenuated elsewhere in my rack and being fed into the attack CV input on BIA. And this needs a little bit of explanation because it depends largely on the position of your attack knob. The attack knob is currently left of noon. So that means that this knob controls how much noise is introduced into the signal. And for a higher pitched sound, being the snare drum, I want more noise to be in my signal than for a tom. So that's why I used an inverse relationship. So there it is. That's how you can create some expressiveness in the way you play BIA with MIDI. By the way, you're welcome to download this loop as a Rex or WAV file to use in your own productions. The links are in the description of this video. So I've changed the patch to sound only a snare drum now, not a tom, just to be able to explain in more detail the settings I've got going on the panel of BIA. I'll explain it, the switch and knob settings, starting with the switches. I'm in skin mode, but I've applied a pitch CV envelope to the skin mode. If I remove this, you hear that it sounds a bit weaker. And normally, in liquid mode, BIA has an internal pitch mode envelope. But I think in case of this snare drum it sounds rather unnatural. It seems that the decay of this pitch mode envelope is a little bit too long to sound natural. So I prefer to put it back in skin mode and apply a shorter pitch mod to the sound, to give it that snappy, stick-like hit sound. The second switch is the pitch switch down here, with a choice of bass, alto and treble. I'm in bass mode with the pitch knob turned all the way up. Now you would expect that if you set it to alto mode and turn down the pitch knob, you'd get a similar sound. But that's not the case. And I suspect that that's because the spread and harmonic settings that deal with the settings, the pitch settings of the other oscillators, are different for a different pitch mode. So I found it works best to be in bass mode with the pitch set to full. If you need a bit higher pitch, you can apply a pitch offset to the CV input and you'll get good results as well. Looking at the knob settings, starting with attack, this to the left of noon determines the amount of noise that you introduce into the signal. And it makes sense for a snare drum to have the maximum amount of noise, but of course you can adjust that to taste. Decay set to pretty low value, although I'm still modulating it, so it's not fully representative of the sound, but with longer decays it starts to get a bit ridiculous. So I'm gonna put that back down. Morph represents the control for the waveforms of the oscillators. And for snare drum synthesis, as you can find in David Betzel's video, it's a good idea to start with a sine or a triangle wave. So as I fiddle with this and I move into square or saw territory, it starts to sound nothing like a snare drum. So I'm just going to put this back to what I think is a sine or a triangle. Spread and harmonic are kind of two knobs that work in tandem. Spread represents the frequencies of the other oscillators that are played alongside the fundamental one. And to model a drum sound, you need a little bit of detuning of different oscillators basically to model the inharmonic properties of a drum. Harmonic determines how fast these other harmonic elements decay inside your sound. So if I turn this up, you can hear the inharmonicness, if that's a word, for the long duration of the tone. And if you dial it back and they only appear at the hit of the sound, it sounds more like a drum. Fold is kind of a wave folder, and it sounds fine if you dial it all the way to the left, no wave folding. You can add a little bit for a little bit more harmonic content and distortion. If you go crazy with it, it may have its purposes, but it sounds nothing like a snare drum in this case. So I hope you found this inspirational and informative. I'd be curious to hear your suggestions on how to further improve this patch. One thing I can think of is that you can scale the pitch mod amount by the velocity in order to get more of that aggressiveness in the harder hits and less of it in the softer hits. Also, I'd be curious to see how you can control this module with touch controllers, like for example the make noise pressure points. I don't have that module, but if you do, please share a video or share some ideas on how it worked out for you. So thank you for watching, happy nerding, until next time everyone. I will jam out in the meantime. Goodbye.